So, my dear ones, welcome into the sanctuary, and all you wonderful folk who are tuning in from your homes, welcome too. We appreciate your presence here with us now. And so, October's moving to an end. It's the last Sunday of the month, and we're concluding what we have been pondering internationally as a community and pulling that all together. So we have been thinking of this, and it seems to be a theme for the last 3 months that has come down to us and through us from on high, whether that be home office or whatever. That understanding and that awareness once and for all that there is only the one life, and that life is God life, and that life is my life now, and all life now. That's what we've been looking at. We've been looking at how to live in a world that supports in compassion and understanding and inclusivity all of life and works together for all of life, and it's good. We've been looking at the unity in oneness and understanding that unity in oneness doesn't mean conformity in that unity, that it is a variety, this unity, of ways of showing up and expressing itself. And it's given to you and it's given to me to be able to recognize that somehow or another, God only knows how, it's all the one thing, all the one thing. After all, there is only one of us. That's all. There is only one of us. There's none other. There's only one of us. So I'm everything and everyone. You are everything and everyone. And that's a mouthful to say. It's an earful to listen to. And it's certainly a challenge to live by. And so we get to look at this thing today called the body of God. Well, before we do that, I think we have to understand what this thing called God means to you and God means to me. Now, having said there is only one, as the good Dr. Ernest Holmes reminds us over and over again, that everything living, moving, and having its being proclaims the glory of God, and every individual in existence lives in God, and there is only the one Spirit out of which all flows. There's only the one mind into which we all think. There's only the one body of which all of us are a part, and there's only the one light that lights the path of every individual one of us. So in that, we're looking at this thing called the body of God. God, what is God? Called by many names and never yet been successfully defined. So we look at this thing called God, and as there are many people on the planet, whether you're spiritually inclined or not, you have a concept of God, and so have I. And if I was to ask you to close your eyes and think of what your concept of God is, I think we would all show up with slightly different flavors and tones and textures to that understanding and that awareness. Now, I love Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber is one of those astounding spiritual minds on the planet at the present time. And he is amazingly known in the spiritual world for that capacity of his to be able to think in that kind of gestaltic way, in that unified way, and see it all as one great big thing. And he has pulled together, he reminds me sort of Ernest Holmes, the way his mind works. He has pulled together under one umbrella a range of what we might understand God to be, as I was sharing this morning. And the range is kind of contained within 5 understandings that is well known of what this thing called God is. And so God is described as the archaic God. The archaic God. What is the archaic God? Well, the archaic God flows out of that deep, intuitive, strong, powerful force that is within us that responds to everything in nature, everything in nature. And so out of that particular understanding and awareness of God, we get the sky, we get the sky and the wind and the moon and the forest and the mountain and the sea gods that have been having altars erected to them since we stood upright. So that we had this wonderful relationship with the elements, nature's elements, the power of the thunder and the lightning and so on and so forth. So that would be the archaic notion and version of God. which we identify with the sweet long ago. And then that moves us into the magical God, So the God who's the kind of the alchemist, the magician, the great magician, the great wizard, so to speak. And that would be the God wherein there's a tendency to understand, there is this magical stuff in the air, there's this magical stuff around us and about us. And if we could just catch some elements, all the different elements that there are, say if we could choose some elements and bring these elements to these elements and combine these elements, then we could get something great and new and different out of that combination, like the search for the philosopher's stone, or the elements that have been coming together to try and produce gold, and so on and so forth, as we've had throughout history, and so on. So in that understanding and notion of God, there is a sense that there's this invisible stuff, and if we could just capture it and harness it, we could, come up with some great good stuff as a result of that. And so you had that going on in our history. You have it going on. These two are still going on in our history. And then that moved us into, because I have to go very quickly into this, there are 5. I mean, this is just a tiny little snippet of each. And then you go into, from the archaic into the magical, into the mythological God. Now we have myths up and down the gazoo from time immemorial, all kinds of mythic stories about humans interacting with God. And usually the mythical God is a sky god of some kind or another. It's in this heavenly paradise and so on, and you can access this heavenly paradise if you follow certain covenants, rules, and regulations and so on, and you can get access into that. And so we understand that. We have the Greek myths and the Roman myths and the Celtic myths and the God knows what myths and every kind of a myth you could imagine. So that's the mythic God. And then you move from that into, you see it as a kind of a circular thing, not like this, but a circular thing. You move around the circle into the mental God. We get to the mental God now, and of course the mental God is what we understand ourselves today as, a power and a presence and an infinite force and an unlimited, infinite, intelligent essence, out of which everything flows and through which everything flows. And you would say that maybe Science of Mind and Spirit embraces this type of God. And yes to that. And then the 5th one is very interesting. And the 5th one, Ken Wilber sums up as the integral God. And the integral God is all of the above, all inclusive. All of the above. I still have experiences of an archaic God when I go out into nature. Absolutely, I do. I still have experiences of the magical God. Indeed, I do, because I just see magic as the power and the presence and the infinite divine substance that's everywhere around us and about us and accessible to us all. That's magic. It's just another word for what they couldn't name because they called it magic. That's what they were naming it as. And so there's alchemy going on still. And so then the mythology, of course, we're all caught up in mythology. We all have our own mythologies about ourselves and each other and life and living too. And then, of course, the mental God. There's that other aspect of ourselves that we know we exist outside of a body, and indeed that the body exists inside this other invisible body, refined body of ourselves. So I would hazard a guess to say we're all in and out of all of those things at different times, and you can name it or you needn't name it at all. You don't have to call it anything, but it's another experience. It's a more experience than your ordinary day-to-day life and living and your ordinary day-to-day thinking about this and that stuff and things and tasks and schedules and all the rest of it and lists just to scratch off and so forth. There's a whole different experience outside of all of our busyment of the embodiment. All of our busyness that has us running and running and running and racing and running, and we never have time to stop and far less smell the flowers, but to get a sense of ourselves as so much more than all our busyment and all of our doing. So we are called to start getting a grip on more of our being and less of our doing. Because we have to do less doing in order to be, do we not? So you and I are in the privileged few. There are not many people around this world in this moment now gathered together in a great room endeavoring to know more about their own good self, their own great self, to know more about life and how life works in its enormity. There are very few people who are doing that right now, and you are. So, this is somewhat of an inkling with regard to what this thing called God or life is. It's just more than anything you might conceive, imagine, or experience. No matter how good it is, no matter how awful it is, it's more. That's what this thing called life, that's what this thing called God is. So how do you relate that to a body then? The body of God. Well, like my own body. I mean, I have a thinking, conscious beingness that directs this body. So, this body is contained within this consciousness, within this mind of mine. And so it is with the great, large, extended world creation body. It is the visible manifestation of the invisible life, infinite intelligence that is. It's the result of the moreness connecting in an alchemical way with the consciousness called mind in the human being. And something happening, it's the action between, if you want to think in terms of old theology, it's the action between the Father and the Holy Spirit that produces the Son. It's the action between the director, the consciousness, with the subconsciousness, spirit, the soul, connecting and producing an outcome, which is a manifestation in form called body. So that's the body of God. It is all of creation, all of creation. And what is it that we're supposed to look at today? We're supposed to look at how the one thing, the power and the presence, this consciousness, this mind thing, can be directed in such a way that it directs the body and all of its parts, its beautiful diversity of parts, in such a way that it all works beautifully together to keep the whole thing magnificently running, so to speak, healthy, fit, full of vim, vigor, zest, and thriving and flourishing. This you are challenged to, and I am, to do at an individual level and at the collective level. This is what it means to create a world, a body, that works for everything and everyone, you see. That's what we're called to. It's not going to happen by any one of us, or too many of us, playing small in a big field. All of us are capable of playing very large and big in any field we find ourselves, whatever it happens to be. So the more we keep ourselves confined to thinking that all I am is a body, is a human body, a human being, I'm not going to be able to succeed and achieve in doing that. I've got to be able to go beyond that, break out of that box, and understand I identify more in truth with everything that's outside of my box rather than what's inside of my box. And everything outside of my box is every single thing, everything, all of life. Whereas contained within the box that I set myself in is just a very tiny, weeny, teeny, beany. You'd have to put it under a microscope to see it, as far as life is concerned, for you and for me. So what is it going to be? And again, the practicalities of it. Last week we were charged with doing one tiny little thing, just a little small incy-weensy thing every day that would improve our lives. I'm going to ask you this morning if you have succeeded and achieved in doing that. It's a rhetorical question. I know I've done better. I could have done more better, pardon the grammar, but I've done better. And what were the other two things? The other two things were to never miss an opportunity, never miss an opportunity to keep your mouth shut. Well, at least when I lost that opportunity, I realized as soon as I'd opened my mouth, I'd lost my opportunity, never to miss an opportunity to keep my mouth shut. And so I improved a bit as a result of that. And the third thing was stop it. Stop being offended. How do we all do with those two things? A rhetorical question. So if you've done well, pat yourself on the back and then do better next week. But that's how we're going to create a world that works for everyone. That's how we are going to be able to find that unity in diversity and understand that unity is not conformity. Everything doesn't have to look like everything, or behave like everything, or show up like everything. Thanks be to God, it'd be so boring if that happened. So you ask yourself, I ask myself, well, what am I doing with this thing called life? How am I doing in this thing called life? What's going on with my life? Could my life be better? I don't think there's one of us in the room that could not answer yes to that question. Our lives could always be better because the best is always yet to be. Because we're always growing, deepening, advancing, wakening up more, becoming a little bit more awake and alert and present. So, what is it going to be for you? Never mind anybody else. You needn't worry about anybody else on this planet. Your only concern is you. And if you take good care of yourself, you will be taking care of all of life too. And when you raise your energy high, you'll raise all energy high. That's the way life works. It's a magnetic field. Everything you think and everything you feel is affecting every single thing and every single one in creation. Every single thing and everyone is affected by the way I think, by the way you think, by the way I feel, by the way you feel. And that's the quickest way to unify what is happening in our world today, simply by unifying everything that's going on in me. Now, I think that because we're such a handful, and that's such a challenge, that we'd rather focus on everybody else getting their act together than we ourselves getting our act together, because that's too big a job, and it's not all that much fun in the beginning. But you know, that's where it is, and that's what it has to be. Or else, I'm not going to change, and nothing else is going to change because I'm not changing. Things only change when I change, for the good, the bad, or the indifferent. That's how change happens, by me, by means of me. I'm the one. And I don't think we grasp that fully enough. I don't think we realize we're that important. I don't think we realize we're that powerful. I don't think we realize that we are that significant at all. I really think, oh, we'll let a Mother Teresa do it, we'll let a Martin Luther King do it, we'll let a Nelson Mandela do it, you know. We'll let those people who are better able to do it than I am. After all, I'm just whatever. No, you're not just in anything. You are the whole of life itself in expression, if you so choose to be that. And I don't say it glibly, and yet you and I are inclined to hear all of this wonderful wisdom, and it goes in this ear, and out the window. And while we're sitting in this room together, while we're here together, it all makes perfect sense. And yes, of course, this is what we're going to do. And we're only out the door and somebody annoys us. And then we forget I'm not supposed to be taking any of this in an offensive way, you see. So back to you, always back to you. The ball is in your court all of the time. And you are the center player in your life. So, are you going to play ball or not? Are you going to hug it to yourself and say, I'm afraid? What if I can't do this? What if they kick me off the team? And so on. Who cares? I mean, really, the one to care about is yourself and what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what you're about to do. And ask the question, every now and again at least, will this improve my life and all life? This decision, this action, this deed, this whatever. Because life is depending upon you and you alone and no one else, it depends on, to show up as it is and be all that it can be. And our challenge is to stop playing so small, to come out of the boxes, to come out of those boxes. And some of them are pretty large, and some of them even have apartments, and some of them even have a penthouse, but nevertheless, it's still a box. It's a box. So who wants to be boxed in? No one in the right mind. So the question is, can we get into our right mind? And the answer always is, of course we can. But we have to want it enough. Here's the thing. What we're mostly inclined to do, picture this. Sicily and, oh no, that's a different thing. Picture this. We're going out there looking for the barrel with Lucky Dips so that we can dip into the barrel, pay our $1, get the ticket, dip in, pick a dip, and hope something good is in it. When all the time we are an incredible, beautiful, boxed, bowed gift. And we're totally ignoring it as we go around looking for the cheap penny dips to dip into to find what we think we need that we haven't got. Now, what sense does that make? For heaven's sake, open up the bows, tear the beautiful paper, take the lid off, and let the genie out. That's all we have to do. That is the teaching of Science of Mind and Spirit. Let God be God by means of you, and so it is.